Could I have somebody read for me for a while? Not a whole lot of names, names we're familiar with. So could I have somebody read for us in Genesis chapter 30? I need somebody who can read verses 25 through 43. Genesis chapter 30, verses 25 through 43. Have somebody who'd be willing to read that for me.
I'll do it.
All right, so Jack and Jim will arm wrestle for it.
He wins.
Jack, if you'll read, I'll tap into Jim when we get into chapter 31 here in a little while.
Okay. 25 to 43. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way so I can go back to my own homeland, and give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you." But Laban said to him, "Well, if I found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." And he added, "Name your wages, and I will pay them." Jacob said to him, "You know how I worked for you, and how your livestock have fared under my care. The little that you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when I do something for may I do something for my own household? What shall I give you?" he asked. "Don't give me any," Jacob replied. "If you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all of your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages, and my honesty will testify for me in the future. Whenever you check on the wages you have paid me, any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark-colored, will be considered stolen." "Agreed," said Laban. "Let it be as you have said." That same day, he removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled and spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. Jacob, however, took fresh-cut branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees, and made white stripes on them by peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. Then he placed the peeled branches in all of the watering troughs so that they would be directly in front of the flocks when they came to drink. When the flocks were in heat and came to drink, they mated in front of the branches. And they bore young that were streaked or speckled or spotted. Jacob set apart the young of the flock by themselves, but made the rest face the streaked and dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flocks for himself and did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs in front of the animals so that they would mate near the branches. But if the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban and the strong ones to Jacob. In this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to his own large flocks, and female and male servants, and camels and donkeys.
All right, isn't that fun?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Back and forth. Now, for the next little while, I'm gonna ask you 2 or 3 questions, and I'm gonna ask them based on just chapter 30. Okay? Here's the reason for that. I'm gonna later tonight ask you some of the same questions based on chapter 31, because chapter 31 is gonna answer some things. Here's why I'm doing it this way. I want us to think through this as if we're hearing Moses say this to us, okay? And we're trying to figure out what he's trying to tell us, okay? And whether we're looking at it or we're hearing it directly from him. That way we can get the feel for it in its original. So I want to start here in chapter 30, verse 25. Rachel has given birth to Joseph, and Jacob says to Laban, I want to get out of here. So why does Jacob want to leave now?
Well, Laban keeps laying expectations on him,
Okay,
and he may be getting tired of that.
all
I
right.
feel like he needs to get off on his own.
I would probably be that way based on if I'd been dealing with Laban for 20 years.
He had a workforce now,
Yeah.
Okay,
got all his children. So he could leave and do everything on his own with his family.
all right. That's a really, really good point because this is a very different reality.
Yeah.
Well, and so his wife has recently had a baby, so she's not pregnant. They have time now to go and travel. At a time good for her and them, and as you know, as he said, with
Because there's been, as we read last week, there's been a lot of pregnancy going on. All right, now. If he had left before Rachel had Joseph, in that culture, that would have been thought to have been inappropriate. Okay? Because if he takes off with Rachel and Rachel has not yet been able to bear children, that there would just been a look of appearances that in their culture that wouldn't have been a wonderful thing. In fact, if Jacob had left without permit, now he seeks permission here. He's not going to seek permission later. To just take off without seeking Laban's permission to take off with the family. And if Rachel had not yet had a child, that would have been tantamount to tribal declaration of war. So, but now he's got his family, he's got his workforce, and he's ready to get out of there. And Laban doesn't want him to go. Why doesn't Laban want him to go?
Been a blessing.
he's been doing great.
Yeah, he's doing all right under the current arrangement. He's doing quite well. So he says in verse 27, if I found favor in your eyes, please stay. Now he says, I have learned by divination. All right. So what does Laban mean when he says, I have learned by divination?
Could have been a dream.
Maybe you went to see a witch.
But it's not his own wisdom.
Okay. All right. All of those. Okay. The overtone here is a supernatural thing. Assumption that whoever's practicing it has the ability to learn things that have not yet been revealed. Y'all ever heard of hydromacy before? Hydromacy is supposed practice being able to look in a cup and see motion in the water or something and learn some type of secret thing in that way. You could find omens, find signs, that sort of thing.
Reading tea leaves.
Yeah, a different way of reading tea leaves, okay? Now, is God going to show Laban anything by divination? Oh my God.
No indication at this point.
No. Yeah, that's a loaded question, isn't it? Because is God limited? No. Can God show anything by any way he wants to? Well, sure he can.
Forbidden by Israel though, because of that was a pagan concept
All right.
and all of those things. So Israel was forbidden from practicing any of those things that were considered supernatural
All right.
at the time. Now, again, you're back to you. God can do anything. So But the use of that to me would indicate, if he used it that way, would indicate that he was using a prohibited, way of handling things.
But it doesn't say that. Yeah. It doesn't say how.
Now,
The NLT does not have that phrase about divination.
Yeah, neither is the literal.
Completely leaves it out.
Okay.
it probably shouldn't, but
And the
okay,
New King James Version wants to use the word experience
okay.
for divination.
All right. Now, you can say, I have learned by divination something that is patently obvious. Is there any question to anybody who's been paying any attention that God has been blessing Laban? You need to learn that about divination. Now, back to something that Bill mentioned, the Jews, I'm gonna come right to you. The covenant law has very strict prohibitions. Do not seek omens, do not go through divination. In fact, you got the whole Saul Witch of Endor thing. But it's pretty obvious that regardless of what he sees.
The New American Standard almost says what you've just stated. It says, but Laban said to him, if now it pleases you, stay with me. I have divined that the Lord has blessed me on your account.
Yes, almost like, how could you miss that?
Yeah.
And so he really doesn't need divination to know whether he calls it that or not. Now, what is really going on, and Laban is wise enough to see it, is that Laban is being blessed just because Jacob is there. There's a spiritual principle here I don't want to overplay, but I want us to be aware of and think about. God blesses the people of the world by the presence of his chosen people. Okay? God blesses the people of the world by the presence of his chosen people. Here's what I mean by that. Nebuchadnezzar was blessed by the presence of Daniel. Pharaoh and all of Egypt was greatly blessed by the presence of Joseph. Didn't make them God worshipers, but they were richly blessed just by their presence. Laban is being blessed by the presence of Joseph. Now, theoretically is pretty important. If you're a believer, your workplace is better because you're there. If you're in school, your school's better because you're there. Whatever neighborhood you're in, your neighborhood is better off because you're there. Because you are a follower of, you're a God-honoring follower of Jesus. Now, I said theoretically for a reason. Because we all have to determine in our own minds, is anybody really better off in my neighborhood because I'm here? But there is a principle there that I didn't want to just rush past. I love what Jacob says in verse 33. Let me go through all of your flocks today. Let me remove from them all of this sort of stuff. And then he says in verse 33, and my honesty will testify for me. Does Jacob's honesty ever testify? Jacob's honesty will testify, all right. But rarely the honesty part. That's a fact. To me, that's just a fascinating statement. So we see the deal. Jacob's going to get part ownership of the herd. The potential to increase as time goes on. Jacob is getting the goats that are not totally black, and the sheep that are not totally white. By the way, throw this in for free. The Laban, the Hebrew was Laban, which literally interpreted means white, which is just a little interesting. It was thought that dark and spotted animals would not produce as much wool or as much milk. When when you look at verses 32 and 33, and Jacob is making the offer, who looks like they're getting the better deal on the surface? Laban. Laban's getting, now Jacob's proposing it, but if you take nature into consideration of what they knew at the time, the common thought would be Laban's getting a good deal. So that's why in verse 34, the first word you hear out of Laban's mouth is agreed. Okay, I will go for that. Now, is that enough for Laban? No. Of course not. Go ahead, Carolyn.
It almost looks to me like God's blessed Jacob by divination. Because do you think laying a stick in a different way would actually physically cause a goat to change colors on a lamb?
We're gonna come to that. We're gonna come to that in just a minute. That's why this is so fascinating to me. Because
You're gonna tell me Santa Claus is real next, right?
So the spotted animals are removed from the breeding pool by Laban, okay? So only those that are born speckled are gonna belong to Jacob. Now, theoretically, what are the chances of that? Not real good. Okay, so Laban has taken a good deal and he's ratcheted it up a notch. Jacob will not be outdone. Hence, we've got what Carolyn just alluded to. So we're gonna take these fresh cut branches and peel the bark and expose some wood and we're gonna put some animals here and some animals here and some are gonna stare at this and voila, our flock is gonna grow. And yet, verse 43 says, in this way. In other words, as a result of all of these shenanigans, the man grew exceedingly prosperous. Why is God really blessing Jacob?
Because he wants to.
Because he wants to,
It's his plan.
for the sake of his covenant. Now, all of this popular branch stuff and all of this, now remember, we're still looking at this through the filter of chapter 30, all right? But if God's on your side, it doesn't matter if the deck is stacked against you. If God is on your side, it doesn't matter if you're dealing with unscrupulous people. He can take something solid and turn it into something speculative if he wants to. He's God. So Jacob goes through all of this and I just love that in verse 43 says in this way, but I think we're smart enough to know in this way doesn't mean as a result of Jacob doing all the hijinks. God is doing something for the preservation and the advancement rather of his covenant.
You know, it's even stranger and weirder. It was not clear, but if Jacob really believed what he was doing was going to have this effect, you know, it's even more weird that God went ahead and blessed him anyway, because he wasn't seeking God. There's no evidence here that he's seeking God to increase his flock.
Yep. At least from what we've seen so far.
So far.
All right. All right. All right. Now let's see some of these things come into a little clearer focus. Jim?
Excuse me. Jacob was at least 50 miles away from where all these flocks are being grown. So he's taking care of Laban's stuff. And all of the others are being taken care of by the family.
Right.
So he's not really playing a day-to-day part in this process. True?
Yeah.
So it's not, we keep saying Jacob, but Jacob is here still working with those other goats and sheep that he kept with Laban. All right. But, well, and you'll know in 31, obviously, but things got out of hand a little bit. But that's what kind of gets me is that Jacob wasn't even the one doing all of this. It was he told them, I suppose, what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, and then they carry it out. And to me, Bill, that's a lot like when we look over in the Kings and it says David slew so many people in a battle and, these are David's men.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so, but I hear exactly what you're saying. So Jim, can you pick up chapter 31, verse 1 and read for a while, 1 through 21?
Okay. Jacob heard that David's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all his wealth from belonged to our father. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had been. Then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were. He said to them, I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said, the speckled ones will be your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said, the streaked ones will be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked young. So God has taken away from your father's livestock and has given them to me. In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw that the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in a dream, Jacob, I answered, here I am. And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, or spotted. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. And Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you. Then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all the livestock ahead of him, along with all the good he accumulated in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had, and crossing to the river, he headed for the hill country of Gilead.
All right. Same question we asked in chapter 30. Why does Jacob want to leave now?
Angel said, "Get out."
Yeah, we got a different deal this time. All right. So we've got Laban's sons, we've got Laban's attitude, and then we've got God coming and saying, all right, time to go. So we've got that change. So now we've got a little bit more insight about what Jacob was up to. What does chapter 31 tell us about some of the things that Jacob was doing? Or does it tell us anything?
Some preparation. Just getting ready to leave, doing what he could.
Okay, all right.
Well, at least in this point, he's also responding to God.
All right.
It's also responding to his own self-interest. But at least he's doing what God wants him to do.
Yeah, good. We see a little bit about why Jacob perhaps would try to manipulate the breeding one way or the other. When Jacob talks to the wives, he gives God the glory for how the flocks increased. I think that is significant. One of two things is going on. Either Jacob really believes that, which would be a really good thing.
Mhm.
God did it, not me. It's also possible, based on everything we've read since we have known Jacob, it would not be beyond him to play the God card with his wives to get them on board for him to go. But we're going to take him at his word. Okay?
Well, also, I would, not so much up to this point, but generally the pattern of God is putting words in God's mouth does not usually serve you well.
No, it's usually not a good thing. And I don't know if Jacob has deduced from all of this that he must be living right. And we're going to come back to that thought here in just a moment. Let me take a quick trip back to Laban's sons. Why are they so high?
Their inheritance is gone.
Yeah, so this has gotten to be very, very personal. Now, the weird thing is even though Jacob's flocks are growing faster, Laban's still doing all right. But in the eyes of the sons, there's now a competitor for the family inheritance. Rachel and Leah are very ready to go, which is interesting. This is the first time you read in the Bible that Rachel and Leah agree on something. They're both more than ready to go. So
They both think that their father sold them.
yes, they do. And that's, yeah, and that's what should have happened is that Jacob works all these years for the wives, and then he continues to work. That money that he worked for Rachel and Leah that ostensibly was going to be the bride price, that money should have been set aside. Apparently, from the implication of his text, for some way, somehow Laban blew through it or ordered it or did whatever. So,
They realize.
yeah, and they know it. Jacob says this man changed my wages 10 times. In Hebrew literature, 10 is a number for complete. So it could have literally been 10 times, or it could be Laban completely changed it over and over and over again. Okay, either way. So in chapter 30, Jacob asked to leave, then he negotiates to stay. Now Jacob just leaves. Now, it's very interesting in verse 20 that it says Jacob deceived him by not telling him he was leaving. Now, does Jacob have a right to go?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah,
Yes, but to your point earlier, culturally though, he should have told him and discussed it with him.
absolutely.
Have a little
Absolutely.
play party.
Yeah.
Should have gotten his blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, here's the deal. God told him to leave.
Yep.
God did not tell him to leave deceptively. All right, there's a difference. All right. So the last thing we get in this part of chapter 31 is Rachel stealing the household gods. And that's going to be a big problem here in just a minute. We do not yet have any evidence of Rachel being a full-on devoted follower of God, at least not to this point. They had household gods back in those days. They were called teraphim. They were about 3 inches in size, give or take. They were believed to bring prosperity. They were believed to bring protection. A lot of the homes, the pagan homes that have a shrine, the gods would be displayed. Some archaeologists believe they had to do with property inheritance rights, so that might have had something to do with why Rachel took them. There's a Hebrew midrash that tries to justify Rachel's actions and says she took the idols so that her father wouldn't worship them anymore. But it's not uncommon for them to manipulate the story to put Rachel in a favorable light. All right, let's go David and then Richard.
Everything we know here is very possible that Rachel was basically sticking it to her father.
Yeah.
You know, not believing any of the above, just, pick him up.
There you go.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. Yeah.
Mine said the idols also guarantee fertility,
Yes.
which would be very important for her.
Yeah. Which is kind of interesting because what good have they? I mean, she's had Joseph, so now she did pray for more, so maybe. So Laban's going to go on hot pursuit, as Roscoe P. Coltrane used to say. On the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. Taking his relatives with him, he pursued Jacob for 7 days, caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night, said to him, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." So Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him. Laban and his relatives camped there too. Laban said to Jacob, which is very interesting after God just told him, don't say anything. Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You've deceived me. You've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me? I'd send you away with joy and singing and the music of timbrels and harps." You can believe that if you want.
He didn't have money for that.
Yeah, you didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. Now, he's right about that. Okay. I have the power to harm you, but now we do get reference to last night, the God of your father said to me, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's household, but why do you still gods? Jacob answered Laban, "I was afraid." That's a significant statement, because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, see for yourself whether there's anything of yours here with me. If it is so, take it. Jacob didn't know, obviously, that Rachel had stolen the gods. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of 2 female servants. He found nothing. And after he came out of Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent. Now, Rachel had taken the household gods, put them inside her camel's saddle, and was sitting on them. Laban searched through everything in the tent and found nothing. Laban said to her father, "Don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence. I'm having a period." So she searched but could not find the household. He searched but could not find the household gods. All right, Jacob was angry. He took Laban to task. "What is my crime?" he asked Laban. "How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? Now that you've searched through all my goods, what have you found that belongs to your household? Put it right here in front of your relatives and mine. Let them judge between the two of us. I've been with you 20 years from now. Your sheep and goats didn't carry by eating rams from your flocks. I didn't bring you animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself, and you demanded payment from me for whatever was stolen by day or night. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime, the cold at night, sleep fled from my eyes. I was like this for 20 years. I was in your household. I worked for your 14 years for your 2 daughters, 6 years for your flocks. You changed my wages 10 times. The God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac," interesting statement, "had not been with me, you'd have surely sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands. And last night he rebuked you." Laban answered, "The women are my daughters, children are my children, flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine or about these children they have borne? Let's make a covenant, you and I. Let it serve as a witness between us." Jacob took a stone, set it up as a pillar. He said to his relatives, "Gather some stones." They took stones, piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jagar Sadutha. Jacob called it Galeed. Laban said, "This heap is a witness between you and me today." That is why it was called Galeed. It was also called Mizpah, because he says watchtower, because he said, "May the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take any wives beside my daughters, even though no one is with us, remember, God is a witness between you and me." Laban also said to Jacob, "Here's this heap. Here is this pillar I've set up between you and me. This heap is a witness. This pillar is a witness. I will not go past this heap to your side to harm you. You will not go past this heap to pillar to harm you. And may the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. He offered a sacrifice there in the hill country, invited his relatives to the meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night there. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters. He blessed them. Then he left and returned home, and they all lived happily ever after. All right, so we've got 3 days of separation between Jacob and Laban. By the time Laban finds out Jacob is gone, we've got basically 6 travel days of separation. We don't know how long it took Laban to gather everybody up, to pursue it. We just know it took Laban 7 days to catch up. So that means he was booking it. All right. Why does God appear to Laban?
I can think of two things.
Okay.
The obvious was to keep him from just flat out killing Jacob as soon as he did.
Mhm.
But secondly, if Laban had any doubts about God, they're gone now.
Yeah.
Okay, God has come to him and directly to him. Okay, it's a dream, but he came directly to him.
Yeah. Which makes something he says here in just a moment all the more fascinating. That's a very important point. Okay. God is showing Laban tremendous grace. Because can you imagine what would happen to Laban if he tried to do something to interfere with the covenant of God?
Right.
That would not be pretty. So in a very real way, God is showing wonderful grace here to Laban. Laban certainly has no right to accuse anybody of deceit. We don't know if Laban would have tried to manipulate. If Jacob had gone back to Laban and said, look, God has told me I've got to go. I've really got to go this time. We don't know if Laban would have said, go and be blessed, or if he would, all he said about a party, we tend not to believe based on what we've read so far. Jacob did do a foolish thing. He did what God told him to do. He just didn't do it the way that he should have done it. The thing that, and especially in light of something David said just a moment ago, the thing that seems to make Laban the maddest is at the end of verse 30. Why would you steal my gods? After he's had a vision from God. Why would you steal my gods? Really?
What God tell him? Not to say anything bad,
Yeah,
either good or bad?
yeah. Well, he
He
didn't
didn't mind him, did
he
he?
didn't handle that particularly well, did he, Carolyn?
Well, he outlined 3 different gods to Jacob right at the end there, saying, let him judge you. The God of Nahor, the God of, these are different gods in his mind. And so he's never left the pagan society, and neither is Leah or, Rachel specifically has not.
Yeah.
So what you said earlier is right. I mean, they in some way believe he's a very important one, God, your God is, but he's part of the mix.
Yeah. And when he asked that question, Jacob says, I was afraid. Why in the world would he be afraid after all he's been through to this point? He's still afraid.
He has,
It's funny. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Laban has all these sons and grandsons that, they were out there to get him back.
Yeah.
He had reason to be afraid.
Neither of these men are very well centered. They've both just been in the presence of God, and they both go off and do really stupid stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, which is kind of like, can you give me a mirror?
Yeah, for sure. Jacob is still not in a place where he fully trusts God regardless. He'll get there. He's almost dead when he gets there. but he's still not there. So we're almost done. Jacob returns the fire. He defends his integrity. He defends his character, which is somewhat humorous. But what he says is true. He worked for 20 years. He was a source of blessing for Laban's flocks. He bore the cost for stolen animals. The more important thing Jacob does is he testifies to the character of God, of Yahweh, which is an important message. God has protected me from you. God has seen my hardship and work. And it's important for us to understand that Jacob seems to be implying that God was watching after me because I was working so hard for you. And that part is not true. God is looking after Jacob because God is looking after Jacob, not because of his righteousness and his hard work.
But it is a mistake we tend to make.
It's absolutely a mistake that we are bad about making. Definite. So the chapter finishes with what I call a covenant of distrust. I don't trust you. You don't trust me. We're going to put this boundary between us. But God is watching both of us. If you mistreat my daughters, I won't know, but your God will know. In a lot of ways, this treaty reveals all of Jacob's character flaws we've seen so far. Because Laban is implying through this whole covenant that Jacob has no integrity. He's still not sure that Jacob didn't steal the gods. He's not sure that how Jacob got possession of all the flocks. He's not convinced that Jacob will take care of his daughters. This is the testimony of one of the patriarchs, the patriarch of the 12 tribes of Israel. Which is not. Couple of final points. Jacob's God in all of this is still too small. God's blessing is not always an indication of our righteousness, nor is our pain necessarily a sign of his displeasure. And that's important for us to understand. The most important thing out of all of this is that God is still keeping his covenant through all of this, because when we are faithless, God is faithful. And he keeps on pursuing, keeping his covenant. All right, next week, Jacob wrestles with God. Jacob and Esau are going to meet. And you all know. All right. Gary, would you pray us out, please, sir?
Sure. Heavenly Father, we come before you today, thanking you for your grace, for your presence with us this evening. We thank you for the opportunity that we have to come and to study your word, and for the time and effort that Mike has to put this together to help simplify it for us, and so that we can have a deeper understanding of the things that have happened in the past. Dear God, be with us, be with those on our prayer list, and be with us throughout the rest of this evening. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate you guys. Enjoyed it. I'll have a good rest of the week.